I'm doing a video right here on triangulars. Mainly I'm dealing with Mississippian period triangles. There are earlier period triangles, like the first triangle points were probably technically not bow and arrow points. They're probably archaic. There's some in Texas called early triangles, and there are different forms of them in the archaic period that are triangular. Sometimes you get small unnotched points that are triangular too in shape, especially the Hopewells made. A lot of times you'll find them on Hopewell sites. Some people call them woodland triangles, and I think a lot of times they're blades or they're unnotched points, but they're probably not technically bow and arrow points. The first bow and arrow triangles appeared during the late woodland period, and they are like your Jack's Reef triangular points. They're kind of pentagonal in shape. I don't have any in here. This is all Mississippian mainly. And then sometimes you'll get Lavana triangles that are kind of late woodland, and they're kind of a really broad triangle but thin. And sometimes you get crudely made ones too. You'll find on thick and crudely made ones I found on late woodland sites. You'll get those late period triangles, late woodland triangles, which are the first bow and arrow points. But the Hopewells also had triangular points, but they're more like small triangular blades, or sometimes unnotched points, and I've found several of them. But your true bow and arrow triangles appear during the late woodland period. I don't really have any Lavanas in here, or I don't have any. Lavana basically looks like a Madison style, but much broader, like a very broad-based Madison. And your Jack's Reef triangulars, or sometimes they're called PDs in the South, are more of a. They just look like an unnotched Jack's Reef. They have a pentagonal look to them. And sometimes you'll get like an unnotched intrusive mound point too. But here's some of the woodland period, the Mississippian period ones that are the most common in my area. You do get like Cahokia points, and you do get Madison style points in Illinois and stuff. We're mainly talking about the Midwest here. You'll get like Cahokia style points, and then you'll get Madison points are found pretty much throughout the whole U.S. And let's start off with a Madison point. This is probably technically a Madison point. It's a little more narrow. It's a longer Madison style point, but it's made out of Carter Cave flint. I have some really short and stubby style Madisons. Here's a Madison style. They're just kind of more squared off the base, and they can be very small. They can be the size of your thumbnail or smaller, but they're just kind of more flattened at the base. You also get a style called Guntersville, and Guntersville is an earlier triangle. Here's a Guntersville, very nice Guntersville point. As you can see, it's more just of a narrow triangle, not quite a Fort Ancient, but it's more of a narrow triangle. That's a very nice one made out of hornstone. Here's another one made out of Boyle's shirt. This is probably what you'd call Guntersville. Just more of a narrow triangle, but not serrated. Not quite like a Fort Ancient style, but they can be. I think they're a little early. Some of these styles are very early. We also get a style that I see that really don't have a name for it. I just call them flare-based triangles. It is my understanding that these flare-based, you can see how they look like Madisons, but they flare out. It may be a flare-based Madison style, but they're probably one of the earliest Fort Ancient style points. You'll find them on early Fort Ancient sites a lot. There's another, that's a very nice one with a flare base on it. To me, in my opinion, these are very early. This is probably one technically too. They're very early period. They're very early Fort Ancient culture, in my opinion. You'll find them on the early Fort Ancient sites. If you're finding the flare base, you're probably on an area that's around 1200 to 1400 AD. If you're finding the serrated ones, which is, I consider the serrated ones, which are the classic Fort Ancients, a middle Fort Ancient period thing. They mainly made these during the middle part of the Fort Ancient period, with a classic Fort Ancient period, let's say like about 1300 to probably about 1500. These were mainly made. The serrated ones were. The Madison style, in my opinion, was in the entire period. I think the Madison style was one of the first triangles, and it was adopted throughout the entire period. So I believe they appeared technically they probably appeared in the late woodland period, and they were used all through the Mississippian to historic times. So it seems like I find Madison styles on just about any Mississippian site. So the Fort Ancients are more of a middle, the classic serrated ones are more of a middle period. You know, maybe the latest they'd ever be used around 1500. They're in that, there could be isolated ones. I've seen some of them come off isolated sites that are later, like 15 to 1600, but they're, the numbers, like the Hardin Village is a perfect example. It's a 1500 to 1650 site, and it's 99% of its Madison points, but you will find an occasional serrated one. But I believe the majority of these serrated ones are middle, what you'd call classic Fort Ancient period, which would probably be around 1300 to 1500 or so, maybe 1200. But these flare bays can be, I think they're very early Mississippian. They're like probably 11 to 1200 to 13 or 1400. But yeah, you can see all the different Fort Ancients. This is mainly a case of Fort Ancient style points. But Madison points, yeah, are used over a large area. You also get this is a Fort Ancient drill right here. You also get drill form. Here's a drill form. This one's actually from the Hardin Village site. It's a very fine pencil drill, Mississippian period. You also get Fort Ancient pentagonal knives. And while they're not a triangle, they have a pentagonal shape on them. You can see this one has the same thing. Goes down into a pentagonal. Sometimes they look more like Cobb's knives. They're kind of squared off. But this is a very classic one. This one's a local one, found close by. But yeah, and sometimes you'll get what we call, this is probably technically a serrated Madison. You know, serrated Madisons are this is from Western Kentucky, I believe. They do find those at Cahokia and places like that, and more southern Kentucky, Western Kentucky. They're basically like a Fort Ancient, but not as narrow. They're like broad like a Madison, but they're lightly serrated. I don't know if I have any more in here or not. And this one's probably pretty similar to a serrated Madison, but it's still probably a Fort Ancient. You also get down south, you'll get a point type that mimics the Fort Ancient, the southern equivalent. And they're made a lot like these little ones right here. And they're called Sand Mountains. They're basically the same point type, but they're usually found in Tennessee and Alabama and out of the distribution area of the classic Fort Ancient. But they're technically probably the same time period and the same point type. But I was just going to make a video on some of the different Mississippian triangles in our area. There's probably even more varieties, but I'm just going over the basic ones. Like here's an example of a Fort Ancient point that was found at the Hardin Village site, and you can see it's lightly serrated. And this site's like 1600, so it's a late period serrated one. But most of these are probably 1400s, I would say. You know, I'd say most of these are, maybe even 1200s. Well, I'm gonna get off here. I'm just gonna make a video on this.